Hello, everybody, and welcome to the virtual launch party of How to Be a Chief Compliance Officer. Natalie and I have huge smiles on our faces. It is a fabulous day when your book launches and when it's out there. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us, whether it's your lunch break, evening, whatever it is you're doing, to come and have a listen. What we're going to do today, a couple of things. We'll introduce ourselves and just tell you a little bit about our backstory and how things came about, both in terms of our careers and then also sort of how the idea to create the book came about. Natalie is going to read a passage from the book. Um, I'm going to ask Natalie a few questions and we'll do a bit of a back and forth. And then there'll be an opportunity about 30, 40 minutes in for you guys to get involved, take yourselves off mute, ask questions. And in fact, feel free to drop questions into the Q&A at any point, and Natalie and I will try to answer them. This is very loose and easygoing, as you may be able to gauge. It is a party after all. We're here to enjoy ourselves and to celebrate. So it should be fine. Natalie has the champagne. Mine is also here on ice and ready to go. Right now, before that, I'm having a cup of tea, and I really wish I could share one of these with you, but this is an impact wheel cupcake. Look at that. I'm very, very pleased with how these turned out. An edible compliance framework, if you will. So I'll be I'll be enjoying that at some point. So let me just add a few more people as they're coming in. Very good. So listen, let's get this thing started. Natalie, take yourself off mute there and join us. Who wants to go first? Shall I give a little bit of my life story, or do you want to kick off first? I really don't mind.
I remember letting you go first with the Following the
Okay.
Rules podcast, and oh my God, following that was a tough act. But go on, go for it anyway. I'll.
Well, some of you on me, I can tell from some of the names. I can see people like Lucy and Sarah and people I know quite well. Yeah, we'll obviously know some of this, and Roz as well. So we'll know some of this. But I suppose just a quick background about me. So I started out my career as a chartered accountant. So I joined one of the big audit firms, Arthur Andersen, as it was. And those of you whose memory goes back that far will know very well how a failure in risk management can impact an organization, because Arthur Andersen no longer exists today. An organization of 80,000 people disappeared due to a reputational risk issue. So that was a very early and foundational lesson for me. But it was a fantastic organization, and I qualified as both a financial and technology auditor way back when. And initially, I started out in Dublin, and after I qualified, I was able to get a transfer to Anderson's New York office, where I worked with financial services clients, a lot of the time down at Goldman Sachs and a range of other clients as well. So after that, well, once Anderson's disappeared, I had to that was my working visa in the US gone, and I had to leave, and I chose to come to London, and initially for 2 years that was the plan, and that was 23 years ago, and I joined Barclays. And I had a long and happy time in Barclays, 13 years in Barclays. I did 5 different roles when I was there, ranging from second line risk roles to first line governance and control, as well as a couple of chief of staff roles. And really, that was my proving ground, my real training ground, I guess, for what was to come after that. And back in about, it must have been 2015, I wanted to give a little bit more back. I wanted to try something, do something probably extracurricular outside of financial services. And I sent off my CV to Save the Children, which was an organization that I deeply admired, thinking I was going to join their audit and finance committee or something like that, maybe, and be a bit useful along the side. In the end, they needed something quite different. Their COO was about to go on maternity leave, and they needed cover. And between us, we managed to agree that Barclays would loan me to Save the Children, initially for 9 months. And of course, those of you who know me know that I ended up staying. But that was my first COO role. And although I had a pretty rounded background by then, I had the finance background, I had run technology projects, I'd worked in risk, I'd had some exposure to legal, so a pretty broad background. But I still couldn't believe how challenging that first COO role was and how broad it was. And that was really the genesis for my first book. because I had to learn that role the hard way. And when I finished that role 2.5 years later, I said, well, I think there's 16 disciplines that a COO needs to have. There's very little written about this role. I wonder if I wrote a chapter on each of those disciplines and if I had it checked by experts and if I put a beginning and an end on it, I wonder, is that a book? And of course, it was a book. And almost 40,000 copies sold later, it is very definitely a book, and it's been useful to people along the way. And that was the genesis for starting out as an author, and that's not 9 years ago now. So I went back into fintech as a COO and CRO and did a number of different roles, and as a managing director in a software company. But I knew I had I knew I had one more book in me, which was the chief risk officer role, and that was the next one that followed. But what I didn't expect after that was the opportunity to collaborate with some absolutely brilliant writers. So with Anne Kiley on a chief people officer book, with Anna Kratova on a sustainability book. I did an AI thought piece called The Augmented COO, and of course now the reason we're here today is Natalie and I have collaborated on how to be a chief compliance officer. And I guess we'll give the book a little. Oh, this is my. Hang on, let me find the pretty one. That's my ugly author copy. Here we go. Here's what it looks like. We're incredibly proud. Oh, look, we've got some people flashing it up there as well. Some early buy. Well done, you got in fast. Well done, Linda, Sarah. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. And it is a fine book, 82,000 words. It's the second longest book in the series, but it's a pacey read. It's not a difficult read at all. And it is chock-a-block with Natalie's accumulated knowledge and a little bit of mine as well. And so just to finish my life story, I guess. So now we have 6 books. We have some courses. I do coaching, speaking, advising, and I'm a non-exec director. But that's a very long-winded bio and an introduction to how things came about today. And I'll stop there and hand over to Miss Natalie to hear a little bit from you as well.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. I forget every time you tell me what you've done. I'm just in awe of you and the leadership from the front that you are absolutely renowned for. And I didn't realize you were an ambassador for Risky Women, but as soon as I was told that, it completely made sense to me. For those of you who are new to Jenny, she is probably the first person I have worked with who is truly uh, empathetic with someone and doesn't crowd them out when they're learning. And I think it's very, very, very hard to be that kind of a leader who gives space for other people. And so, even though Jenny overwhelms me with her brilliance and her resume, I never felt like I was anything other than an equal in this process. And that really takes an incredible person to achieve. So, Jenny, thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. I mean, I don't know if this book would have gotten finished. I certainly would have gotten started, but I don't know if it would have gotten finished if I hadn't met you, and it certainly wouldn't have gotten finished in this form. And if I think about all of those early moments from shaping this book up, the structure and the goal and the vision that we came up top down and bottom up together, it's just not something I think that's even feasible for one person to have created on their own. So it's been an absolute joy. But in terms of who I am, so for those who don't know me, I'm Natalie. I'm currently in Tokyo, but I have spent my life in the UK. I am coming back in a few years. I've got a little boy who may or may not run in at any moment. I feel I have to give that disclaimer because he is a rambunctious Labrador. And we love him greatly, but you can never trust him when the door is closed. So forgive me if that happens. I've been in compliance and regulation for 20 years. I fell into it like most compliance officers do. Way back when I thought I was going to join the civil service after doing PPE at Oxford, because that's what you do if you have less of an ego. Uh, than say the current cabinet, and I didn't actually follow through on the graduate scheme for the civil service. I detoured into the Financial Services Authority, in part because they paid you so much better, but also because it just seemed like a really virtuous path that was putting into practice the philosophy of regulation and politics rather than just pushing paper around in the background. Jenny's heard this story before. I think I was 22, 23 years old, and I was interviewing my first non-executive director of a FTSE 250 company, which is not something that should be done. Let's be frank. But it was a wonderful experience. And so after growing up at a regulator, I got a little disillusioned with how regulators think about the world. It is a bit ivory tower. They see the world as something that can be fixed if only you fix the people. And I think what Jenny and I have spent our careers realizing is you can't fix the people. The people are broken and messy and imperfect and beautiful and wonderful. You have to create systems that reflect the idiosyncrasies of people. And too much of my life in compliance has been spent working with people who are too binary, who are very much, this is how the world should be, not this is how the world is. How do we move to something that works? So for me, the book that we've written has been in me since I started my career. I've always had a deep-rooted dissatisfaction with the way people talk about compliance, the poor cousin of accounting, the poor cousin of legal. It's a career path that has been fought for by people who have built something out of nothing, and it's become something new. And this felt like a perfect time with the information age really bludgeoning all of us, um, to do something in the public sphere and put out the story of compliance that made sense for the new world. So I mean I have had a jungle gym of a career. I've been a chief of staff in a compliance function. I have led enterprise risk before. I've worked in sustainability compliance, research compliance. I have been messy in my career. I have been nudged by incredible people. I was made redundant 6 weeks into my maternity leave, which is an entirely different story. And one I am eternally grateful for, because if I hadn't been pushed to go and find another opportunity, I never would have started my own company. And I never would have had the opportunity to formulate the ideas that really became the bedrock of this book. So everything has its place in your story. Every little mishap that you think is going to change you can change you for the better. And so it's been a very empowering career. It's not one that made sense at the time, but when I look back, I can completely understand how I got where I got to. So, um, we can talk at length about the MD journey in a bank. We can talk at length about the frustrations of women in leadership, but that's not really what we're here to talk about today. And that might be another book of how to be managed or how to be a good leader, as opposed to um, some of the shocking exhibits I've sometimes seen in my seat. Um, just how to be better, really. So, but that is what this book is at its heart: is how to be a better leader, how to shape others to be better, how to craft a message for your organization that really makes sense for the modern world, and how to not lose yourself as a leader in an organization that is obviously going to be very big and have its own party line. So yes, so the book feels like a wonderful place to have pivoted from big banking and then into aviation and then hopefully into something new.
Thank you, Natalie. And when I hear your story, I'm just reminded by how, when we first met, that we both felt, I think, that we had found a kindred spirit, because both of us kind of had these careers where that maybe didn't make linear sense. Both of us had bumped up against frustrations along the way. Both of us have this kind of impatience, and like we want things to be better than they are. And I think I said to you, I knew the first time we spoke, I was like, I think there's something here. I think we can do something here. And it's been, and just total credit to you. Like Natalie, folks, is a beautiful writer. If you've looked at the book yet or anything, I mean, I'm not just talking. I mean, you need to write clearly and persuasively to write a business book. But there's much more flair to that, and something tells me this is not Natalie's first, or not Natalie's last book. There's going to be more along the way. But maybe to illustrate just a little bit of that, Natalie, can I ask you maybe to pick up our lovely book, and hopefully you've identified maybe a little passage that you can read to people for a few minutes.
Yeah, so this is a bit practical. Remember that my lifeblood is compliance advisory. So for me, the advisory chapter, which is chapter 21, is really the thing that I wanted to bring to life that I knew hadn't been written down anywhere. So I'm just going to read for a few minutes from chapter 20, chapter 21. So I know a few of you have read it from the start of the book, so I wasn't going to rehash our introduction, which I think is most excellent, actually. So let's jump around on the pages. So here we go. Are you recording this, by the way, Jenny? Because I saw.
I
Am
very
I
much
about
hope
to?
so. Yes, this session is being recorded, so we'll have this for posterity for the future as well, and we'll share it after the fact.
Excellent. I'm glad I haven't had my glass of champagne first. Okay, well, stick with us, folks, and let us know if it hits the mark because we are contemplating doing an audiobook if the book does well. So, okay, so joining up the 365 model. Advice is the connective tissue that brings the Compliance 365 model together. Without credible, trusted, and well governed advice, even the most sophisticated compliance framework becomes performative. With it, compliance becomes dynamic, responsive to change, embedded in business thinking, and capable of navigating ambiguity with integrity. In the end, it is advice that transforms compliance from a static program into a living system. And it is the humans behind that advice that make compliance meaningful. So, what makes a good compliance officer? A good compliance advisor sees the bigger picture. While the core value of a technical compliance advisor is their subject matter expertise, they also need to be competent in the broader compliance universe, recognizing trigger points for bringing in other technical experts when needed. They own the quality of advice, not the decision. Advisors do not own business decisions, but they are fully accountable for the quality, integrity, and completeness of the advice they provide. Regulators increasingly assess not just whether advice was sought, but whether it was fit for purpose, technically sound, appropriately caveated, proportionate to the risk, and delivered at the right time. They recognize the criticality of credible challenge. The defining feature of good advice is not agreement, but credible challenge. Advisors must be willing to probe assumptions, stress test rationales, and articulate uncomfortable risks clearly and calmly. Challenge should be evidence-based, proportionate, and focused on outcomes, not personalities. Knowing how to persuade through challenge is an elevated skill that requires understanding of cognitive biases and behavioral psychology, motivation, and sales tactics. Knowing how to write that challenge down in a way that captures the issue but does not unintentionally set hairs running is another skill set entirely. They need to know how to write. They need to know how to both tell a compelling story and be methodical. They must be literate, concise, thorough, accurate, and unemotional while producing memorable insights and recommendations. This is a hard won skill set that is not to be taken for granted. They must be deft communicators on the page as well as in person. They influence using the organization's culture. How advice is shared is just as critical as the message itself. It needs to be in a language and form that the recipient is prepared to listen to and follow. They earn trust through solutions, not silence. Advisors are invited into conversations only if they are trusted to help find solutions. That trust depends on early access, before ideas harden and before warning signs become crises. Organizations that delay compliance involvement deprive themselves of foresight and increase the cost of remediation. Solution orientation does not mean permissiveness. It means helping the business achieve objectives within credible regulatory boundaries, not finding post hoc justifications for decisions already taken. Where does that ring a bell for? The CCOs must hire and develop advisors with curiosity, judgment, and problem solving instincts, not a default posture of suspicion or obstruction. They need to identify compliance risk. They are among the organization's most sensitive compliance sensors. Patterns in advisory work, including recurring discomfort, repeated edge case interpretations, pressure to make it work, or increasing reliance on caveats, are valuable risk intelligence. Where advice repeatedly pushes against the same boundaries, the issue is rarely isolated. It is structural and needs a deeper analysis. Almost there, guys. They treat escalation as a professional duty, not a personal failure. Effective advisors escalate before misconduct or poor compliance protocols become entrenched. Escalation should be proportionate, reasoned, and well documented, but it must occur when risk tolerance is exceeded or where advice is overridden without adequate justification. They guard against going native. Discretion is a powerful advisory tool and a dangerous one. Close partnership with the business can slide into over-identification, where advisors internalize commercial pressures and unconsciously soften their challenge. This phenomenon, often described as going native, is a recognized failure mode in advisory functions. It may result in compliance officers defending the actions of their business or taking a more permissive approach to discipline or breach enforcement. Independence is not maintained by structure alone, it is sustained through leadership and example. And an advisor provides advice that is reasonably defensible after the fact. They should assume their judgment will be reviewed in hindsight by regulators, auditors, or courts. Advice should therefore be defensible ex post, grounded in facts, aligned with policy and regulatory intent, appropriately caveated, and proportionate to risk. This does not require exhaustive documentation, but it does require discipline in capturing material judgment and points of discomfort. There you go.
Woohoo! Well done. Thank you very, very much. And hopefully, folks, you can get a bit from that. Just how beautifully written this book is. You're getting applause here, Natalie, and it's a joy to read. So Natalie, in my process, if I wrote a piece, she would review mine. If she wrote a piece, I would review hers. Because of the technical content, the bulk of the writing is from Natalie, and it was a joy to read. And there was really very, very little that needed to be done with it by either me or by our editor. And I think the end result really flows and it's an easy read as well as a very comprehensive one. So I hope you all enjoy it when you get to it. So with that in mind, Natalie, I wanted to maybe ask you a couple of questions, and we have done a podcast already. And the podcast is out, but I kept a few questions back from the podcast, if that's all right. So I thought I might interview my co-author, if that was okay.
Go
And
for it.
and by the way, everybody else on the line, if you have questions, start getting them ready. We'll do a little bit of Q&A here, and then I think we might pop the champagne at that point, and then open up to the audience Q&A, because you'll get better answers then once Natalie and I have a glass of champagne in front of us. Anyway, right, we'll kick into it. So the first thing I wanted to ask you, so when we met and we spoke early on, and we had a lovely lunch in Covent Garden, I remember.
Yeah.
But you said that you had been writing or working on a book for was it 10 years or something like that? Have you always liked writing? And how does it feel to finally be published after all that?
Yeah, so it is actually really nice to be able to answer the question, what are you? And say, I am a writer. I've waited a very, very long time. And Linda, I remember a conversation in your Chailey flat at 14 years old, and I said I wanted to be a writer, and you said you thought I was going to do it. And it has taken me 26 years to make that happen. But we have a book, which is phenomenal. But the true passion is fiction. Um, and I remember when I got interviewed for Oxford, God, this sounds so pretentious, but the first question that the tutor asked was, "Well, why are you not doing an English degree?" And I said, "Well, I already know how to write. I want to know something to write about." And I think my answer to that question got me into Oxford, actually, because it certainly wasn't any of the other interviews. They were very lackluster. And I love the written word. I love manipulating words. I love the logic of it, the poetry, the beauty. And I said I'm in Tokyo, and there's a real sense of language is poetry here. Like just asking for coffee is poetic here, and it's beautiful and it's craftsmanship. And I don't understand most of it, but I can admire and appreciate it. And I actually think coming out to a different country has helped me appreciate the beauty of the English language even more. So whether I'm crafting a little essay or a blog post or something for the Journal of Financial Compliance, or the latest fantasy trilogy that I'm working on and have been since I was about 14 years old, what my best friend euphemistically calls my magnum opus, and also a trashy page turner at the same time. So that's going to be quite a different read to this one. It doesn't matter. There's something in the art of holding the pen and Jenny and I absolutely adore the Remarkable Pro because it means you can actually hold something that feels like a pen to make your notes. And gosh, I really hope that we get some sort of like credit for all these name dropping of product placements that we have got no endorsements for.
Mm.
But I love the craftsmanship. And it turns out I'm absolutely atrocious at certain things like poetry. Adore it. What I write sounds like a teenage goth. But I have come to appreciate with time that there is a real sense of maturity and focus that you need to write well. Um, and as we've discussed time and again, it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it. So I am a true believer that being a storyteller has made me better at my job, and my job has made me a better storyteller. Because if you're not watching people, if you're not learning from them, nothing really rings true. So yeah, so the goal with Tokyo is put the pen down on this one and actually finish the damn fantasy book. But we shall see. It's only taken me
But
20 years to get to this point, so it probably will be another 20 before it's finished.
I think now having got to the end of something, and I really mean like dotting the I's, crossing the T's, getting the editor feedback, putting a beginning and an end on it, getting an ISBN, putting it up on Amazon, all that kind of thing. I think now that you've done it once, you've kind of broken the seal, if you know what I mean. And I think
Here's hoping.
yeah, this will be the first of many to come. And even the act of, choosing our cover design and all that sort of thing,
Yeah.
you've seen the process end to end now. And I look forward to the fiction. My goodness, that's gonna be a read. What was the trickiest part of the process for you along the way?
It wasn't the writing. It was probably the social media engagement, if I'm completely honest with you. It's just I'm not good at it. Like I've had to like double my LinkedIn following in a very short period of time, and it makes me feel chronically challenged to have to go out to journalists and say, "Buy my book," or "Buy our book." And so that there have been moments in that which I did not think I was possible it was possible for me to actually deliver on. But that's where you have shone through and helped push me to be um, a better marketer, a better PR person. And as we know, everything is sales. So if you can't love your book and put it out there to the world and with a passion and conviction for it, then no one's going to pick it up. So that was very difficult. The writing itself was pretty seamless. Um, there is obviously in this day and age, the elephant in the room is your generative AI. So there is always that temptation to cheat and to leverage Claude or ChatGPT to help with ideas. And so keeping the ideas pure and the sentiment pure, it was actually relatively straightforward for us to do. But I think if we were writing this book in a year's time, we'd be competing against AI generated books on compliance. So I feel at this point we've written a manual that I think AI is going to steal from and leverage to hopefully get to a better common ground in the future.
Mm,
Um, and AI will be richer for our book. I know that for sure. Um, so as I say, the writing itself seamless. I really enjoyed the process. I think there were a couple of moments early on where structuring the book in a way that made sense for the universal audience we wanted to appeal to was challenging. I think the wonderful work that the other How to Be a C-Suite books has done, paving the way for this one, created a really helpful starting point for us, which were the three lenses that we talk about in every C-Suite book. And Jenny, you've always done a great job bringing that to life and really putting purpose at the heart of these books. Um, and then from there, it was just what's the catchy acronym for the impact wheel? And I had eight spokes, and someone said, "Well, what about six?" And then you can get to impact. And I was like, "I'm stealing that." Um, and it wasn't impact to start with, but there are a lot more six-letter words than there are eight-letter words. So I had to condense this model that I'd built for a client of eight down into six. So that was that was probably the hardest bit was getting that framework right, and then everything else just flowed like water from a tap. So how about you? What would you say was the challenge?
Yeah, I will say, by the way, the writing did flow from you. It was incredible. You were unbelievably productive and prolific in terms of getting content out. And I would say, yeah, I think getting the structure right at at the beginning, and then we'll talk a bit about marketing at the end as well. But the one thing I've said to all of my collaborators is that, you know, that structure that I started with in the COO book of starting with culture, strategy, and execution as being three sort of foundational lenses or pillars that before you do anything else that you've got to address, whatever your C-suite role. Actually, you've got to start being cognizant of the cultural reality of the organization that you're in. The strategy, what the organization is trying to achieve, what makes that organization what it is, its unique selling point, its capabilities, its competitive moat, its competitive environment, and then finally execution, how it gets things done. If you neglect those before you get into the technical detail, then you're not going to lay out your stall correctly. You're not going to set your framework out right. So I've said to all of my collaborators, like, the technical meat in the sandwich, the bit in the middle, I'm absolutely trusting you with, because that's what you do, and that's your, you know, that's your life experience. And you know, all of my co-authors have had, you know, 15, 20, 25 years of experience all distilled into this book. And we know at the end we want to talk about certain things like building a team and leveraging data and technology, and there's certain things like that we want at the end. But we always start with the pillars. So and actually once we nailed that structure, I think then it was like, okay, go. And that's when just, you know, it unleashed the creativity, as you know, in you. I think I also struggle, by the way, with the marketing and the PR. I'm not a natural salesperson at all. I'm a COO by background. I'm a product. I'm an operations. I'm a sort of unglamorous kind of person. So I'm still working on, you know, how I put myself and the books out into the world and that kind of thing. And you know, I've learned a few things along the way, but it's still a little bit of discomfort I have to overcome as well. But I also just wanted to pick up on the AI piece, and just because I think it's worth, I think as authors we have to we should talk about that. I've always said that my books will be human, organic, right? They will, because our value is in distilling, you know, between me and Natalie, 50 years of experience, right, of learned experience into a book, and into what we wish we'd known at the outset of our careers and what we want to pay forward. And if we don't have that, then we don't kind of have anything. Where I think we found AI useful sometimes is in, say, structuring a chapter or something like that, and saying, okay, we want to talk
Mm.
about this topic, you know, give me some headlines, give me some things. And what it's very good, I think, at doing is making sure you haven't kind of missed something. You know, you kind of go, oh yeah, no, that's I hadn't thought about incorporating that. So we used it in that way, I think, to kind of just make sure that we comprehensively covered a topic and not missed a heading. But the writing is absolutely a majority in this book, Natalie, but absolutely Natalie and me, and human driven, and kind of always will be. And yes, it is more competitive on Amazon now than it ever was before. And there is lots of AI slop out there, including I've had to chase down some people who've taken versions of my book and distilled it into
Mm.
absolute and utter garbage, and get it taken down again. But that's the kind of manifesto on AI for what it's worth.
Yeah, as a thought experiment, I took one of the essays I wrote for the Journal of Financial Compliance on risk assessment, and I said those essays are like 6,000 words, and we had a vision of these chapters shouldn't be longer than 3,500 words. So I said, okay, take this essay and write a chapter, 3,500 words on this. And what it came back with was so superficial, and everything that made my essay me was stripped out. And there's this great little picture on LinkedIn. God, I need to like get better social media platforms. There's this picture on LinkedIn of all these people in colorful outfits going into an AI machine and coming out in grey suits. And I just
Mm,
thought that to me is AI in a nutshell, is what it creates lacks the character and the brightness of individual personality. And the post was being used to illustrate that everybody writes in the same way when they use AI. And
mm,
it's not just are they using M dashes, it's more inhuman than that.
yeah.
It's the way emphasis is put on certain words. And obviously AI is getting smarter, and now you've got people who think that they found a writer who used AI, and there's a witch hunt, a social media witch hunt that follows it. And then it's complete defamation. And the writer comes out saying, would you like the 10 years of notebooks that support this book? And I think there is actually a defamation case being brought against
Mm,
a social media influencer who she's like, I'm 19 years old, I can't afford to fight this. It's like maybe you should be a bit more careful about the accusations you make against writers.
mm,
So it's a really interesting time, I think, to be a writer.
yeah,
But as I say, I think what AI does beautifully well is it synthesizes information and strips it into something concise, but it then takes away the beauty and, as you say, the personal experience that sits
yeah.
behind that. So I'm fairly confident that our book will stand the test of time. But as I say, I suspect elements of it will start ending up in AI answers from other people over time, which is probably a compliment, but also a copyright infringement.
Yeah, we'll see how that one works out along the way.
Yeah.
And listen, Nat, we've talked about it. I teed up the three lenses of culture, strategy, and execution. But for completeness sake, and also to allow me to take a bite of one of these cupcakes, could you do you just want to talk briefly about the compliance 365 model and in particular the
Yeah,
625?
sure. Sure. I mean, as everyone knows, I'm extremely brief, and yeah, that's definitely my skill set. But yes, the 365 model just felt like a moment of brilliance. And again, it was supposed to be the 385 model, and then someone pointed out that if it was six spokes, not eight, 365 was every day of the year, and I was just like, that is beautiful. So the impact wheel is based on risk management life cycles and regulatory change management life cycles, and it basically puts risk evaluation at the heart of every compliance activity at the organization. So you identify, you know your rules, you know the harm, you apply them to your organization, and then you identify what's changing. And that intelligence and tracking drives your measurement, your M, and you are measuring compliance risk every day. You're doing it at the water cooler, you're doing it in the boardroom, but you're also doing it in those really like unmeasurable moments. You're tacitly doing it in the ether of your brain. So um, for us, we wanted to make sure that we pulled out both the behavior of risk management and also the structures of risk assessment within the measure part of the impact wheel. Once you've measured something, you can manage it. So you can compare it, you can calibrate it, you can ignore it, and you make an informed decision, which takes you to protect. So what do you do to actually manage the risk that you're seeing in front of you? What compliance measures do you take, and when do you say good is good enough? From there, you move into your assurance function, which is traditionally where compliance really has sat as an organization, which is your monitoring and testing and surveillance activity. And we wanted to, again, root that in real world information and intelligence that comes out of your everyday compliance risk management and decisions. From there, you obviously then have issues that have been identified, so you then correct them. And within this really sizable segment of the book is a whole lot of information about whistleblowing, and it's a very long conversation and possibly the topic for another book. The perils of whistleblowing regimes and how they change behaviors and how people get punished in practice even when they say they don't. Um, as well as, of course, how do you actually do breach management well? How do you make that intelligence useful for the board, but also for that ongoing day-to-day changing compliance focus? And then landing on TEL, which is again purpose-led board reporting, purpose-led compliance risk reporting, and of course regulatory engagement. So what are you telling your regulator? What are they asking you for? And then that generates its own intelligence, which then starts the cycle all over again. So that's our impact wheel. And in the book, we break out the various different compliance activities, but we make it very, very clear that these are small C compliance activities. They're not a big C compliance department function necessarily. So they may exist anywhere in your organization. Some of them need to be done with independence and rigor, and others less so. So you need to map your universe of activity, your compliance ecosystem, and then you need to say, is this fit for purpose? Is this actually going to result in changing behaviors and the right outcomes in practice? And then the five element is five pillars that underpin this. And again, there's one chapter per pillar. So governance, operations, data technology, and advisory. And again, we're very, very clear in the book. These are not necessarily compliance silos in your organization. And compliance done well is a real integrated model across your organization. And we even add in an extra bonus chapter on compliance in the age of AI, which is where Jenny and I met. It was on a Women in Banking and Finance panel that I'd set up a couple of years back, maybe only a year actually, feels longer. Um,
Mm.
and we wanted to really talk through what AI in practice looked like for a compliance officer. And I think this is an area that there will be so much written about in future.
Yeah.
But for now, it's really just a jumping off point. So I think we had a conversation fairly early on about uh, whether people were already in the AI revolution for compliance. And I was like, yeah, we've got all these systems now. And you said no. And
Yeah.
we went away and thought about it. And we think there's a lot of talking, but not quite so much action. I think people are still struggling with the basics of data quality, data validation. And until you've got good processes, you can't have good AI-led processes. And we think that there's still a lot of people falling at that first hurdle of building compliance programs and processes that are fit for purpose. So that's the book in a nutshell. It follows that path, that model, and then right at the end there are some elements that focus on compliance in practice, including what was our first chapter that we wrote, which was on budgets and convincing the CFO to give you money, which I wrote very, very quickly on the back of a very revelatory conversation with a CFO at a client who basically said, show me that this compliance saves me money before I invest in it. And I was like, okay, that's an interesting question when you don't have a compliance risk assessment. Let's go away and think about it. So
Yeah.
all topsy-turvy. So the last chapter of our book was the first one we wrote.
Yep, yep. Brilliant, brilliant summary there, and you've basically, folks, have, heard the outline of the book and how comprehensive it is. And it was a joy, to work with Natalie on it, and to add some perspectives on things like technology and, as I say, AI and compliance. I think of all the functions in an organization is one that is going to be inordinately, I think to benefit inordinately from AI, but obviously also to face changes and some threats as a result of it as well. And it's going to be really interesting to watch how it goes from here. I want to give people a chance to ask some questions. I had two quick final ones for you, Natalie, and then we're going to pop some bubbly. Very briefly, writing habits, and I'll start. So I either write here in this room that you can see behind you, or I have a little garden room where I take my laptop, and I have to have Ludovico Einaudi playing in the background. So he's like my Pavlovian kind of when once I hear that music, I just go and I go into writing mode and so on. But anything you want to share? Time of day, where you write, how you
Uh,
write, and anything to share?
I refer you to my 2-year-old. I write when I can as opposed to when I want to, but otherwise it doesn't get done, which has actually been a really interesting experience for me. So I used to like the structure and I have no structure. It's all horrible. So a lot of the book got written at like 1 in the morning when I'd put Charlie down for a sleep and I knew he was going to be waking up at some point. So I just carried on working through and maybe it's the ADHD of my brain that says the hyperfixation, the hyperfocus, get into the zone and just go. And you go through your hunger signals, you go through your thirst signals, and next thing you know, you've spent 5 hours writing 6,000 words. And they're not necessarily brilliant, but they're words on a page that you can come back
Yeah,
to and refresh. So
yeah,
editing something I've written is very structured, and that's generally sit in a dark room, as an old manager of mine said, cowl on your head, and just play something soothing. White noise is actually perfect for this. Um, and but the actual passion, the writing, the flair of writing, that just happens whenever. And so I've increasingly started writing on my phone. I hate it. I can't stand it. I
wow,
love, as I said, I love a notebook. And I like having the computer and the big screen and having the tent around you, but you have to take what you can get. So the bits that are the best written, I think you can tell I was sat in a tent with no distractions. But sometimes good is good enough.
Yeah, and I mean, absolute kudos. I mean, it's hard enough to write a book, but to do it with a toddler in tow and a family life move halfway around the world and everything else as well. Honestly, it's such an achievement. Absolute kudos. And listen,
Thank you.
last thing I would say, there's a lot of senior people leaving the workforce right now. Like you talked about your journey, I left the executive space a few years ago as well. And that's either by choice or by force or whatever the circumstances are that kind of come about. And to me, that means that there's a mountain of accumulated knowledge and experience to be shared. And also, there's a lot of
Mm.
people with the rest of their careers to design. And I suppose, having gone through the experience, what would you say to someone who's maybe at that point and thinking that writing a book is for them?
Funny, I have a couple of friends who are partners at Big Four and they're about to hit 60 and they are facing this cliff edge of being forced out of the workforce when they're not ready. Um, And I absolutely think they should just start writing things down. So a lot of what we put into our book were notes that I scribbled in the margins of policies 10 years ago. They were in note form on a phone of things that just in a moment just seemed interesting. And you can't wait for critical maths. You've just got to get started and start with the thing that resonated with you yesterday that someone said to you or you overheard on the train. Just write it down and then once you've written another sentence, then another one and another one, then you've got your first chapter. Whatever particularly incenses you in a moment, use that passion and write about it. It's both cathartic and the start of your book. You may well never use that content, but you've got to start with something. And I found this out with audio recordings. Like once you've recorded a few chapters, you realize the first one that you recorded just wasn't particularly high quality, and so you go back and redo it. And writing's very similar. So there is no shame in a second edit or a third edit or striking things through. You have to feel like you're a creator. But I do remember from that Covent Garden lunch that we talked about how actually there's a logic to writing, especially a book like this. And if you've got a good structure, then that will take you
Yeah.
far further than if you're a beautiful writer, but you don't know how to get started. So
Mm.
um, not everything is different for different people. You just have to find what makes you happy and write it. It doesn't matter if it's grammatically incorrect. I mean, my inner 17-year-old hates me for saying that, but um, it's communicating your story,
Yeah.
and it's important because it's your unique perspective. So I would love everybody to write down. There's wisdom in everybody. Um, and if you're just paying attention, you can capture that wisdom from other people, and then you have a book
And pay it forward, hopefully, to the next
and pay it
generation as
forward.
well. And I completely
Exactly.
agree. The author of Eat, Pray, Love, Liz Gilbert, calls that process of writing clearing your throat. Sometimes that first paragraph or that first whatever 500 words or you might not use it. It might be rubbish. You might scratch it, but it's just you're clearing your throat. You're just getting, you're getting the juices flowing. And I think this experience, and it's been a joy, Natalie, to work on this book with you,
Likewise.
but has paved the way, I think, for something that I'm thinking about working on in future, which is to help people coming out of that executive career on a more industrial scale, not just through the C-suite books, but to help them get their accumulated knowledge down. So watch this space over the summer for maybe a new offering in that space.
I think you'd be
Right.
fantastic at it.
I think it's time. I'm
Is it time? Do we get the champagne? Still
I'm getting
cold.
started.
All
Anybody else
right.
who's feel free to join us with tea, water, champagne, whatever your poison is. Natalie and I have earned this one. And sadly we can't do it in person. Or we'd go back to Covent Garden and do it. But we're going to open the champagne. And while we do that, let's hope we don't take anyone's eye out. While we do that, feel free to come off mute, to show your video if you would like to, and to ask any questions. And let's see if we can. It's a bit of a compliance risk, but are you ready? Are you there with me, Natalie?
Go for it.
Oh, there we
Yeah.
go. There's my one.
I opened mine off camera because the first champagne bottle I ever opened, I didn't realize that you don't shake them. I saw
Oh,
F1. I saw that so like poor 18-year-old Nat, and it was spectacular. So the cork shot out of the bottle, hit the spotlight of the bar that I was working in, Took the spotlight out. Next thing you know, you've got glass and champagne raining down on me. And I looked at the person who bought it and I just handed them the now half empty bottle of champagne and went, that'll be 40 quid. I've never been so mortified in my life. But as I say, every story has its place in your own character development. So
Okay,
and
all right,
chin
well
chin.
done. Cheers, congratulations,
Cheers.
well done
Thank you
us. Book
everyone for
number
joining
6,
us.
How to Be a Chief Compliance Officer, is
There
out
you go.
in the
Let's
wild.
do the
Yeah,
screen
yeah, yeah,
grab.
yeah, 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 yeah. Toast,
Yeah.
toast that one. Thank you for,
Thank
yeah,
you.
thanks for,
Thank you,
oh, that, yeah,
everyone.